Hey, and we are back.
And we are live.
Welcome back to Tech Interview Pro.
Live Q&A. Yeah, I guess we'll just wait a little bit, maybe like 5-10 minutes so that everyone can start coming in.
Yeah.
And, just to do some technical checks. If the audio is good, is the audio good for you guys? Is the camera quality good for you guys? I don't know. But yeah. What time is it for you guys? It's been, because I know some of you guys are coming from East Coast or
Welcome
even...
back to the Tech Lead and Joman's Psychic.
I'm also important, right? Oh, 8 p.m. Oh, so that guy is on the PST time. 11 p.m. for some people. Wow, that's pretty late. Oh, no audio? I don't think so. I think that's just for you, Sunil.
Yeah, turn up the volume.
Turn up the volume. Hello. See, yeah, especially, there has to be audio because people are responding to us.
Yeah.
So it has to be, yeah. Can you open the doc? Oh, the quality seems pretty good, right?
Yeah, I think the quality is better than last time.
Good.
So
Okay.
that should be good.
Cool. Yeah, can you pause this? Just so that I don't need to like download and upload. Okay. All right. You didn't... Okay. Yeah, so I guess we'll look at the questions there. All right, cool. So I hope everyone is settled in. We have 19 people. Woohoo! That's great. All right, cool. So we'll start with some updates, I guess.
Yeah, so you may have noticed that we did finish publishing our courses, additional content on the systems design training, as well as transitioning to software engineering, and then talking a little bit more about Joma's transition from data scientist into software engineering. So check those out if you haven't already, and we hope that you guys find those useful. And yeah, also let us know, what else that you want to see, and we can see about developing further content for you guys. So just let us know where you think you want more focus and attention on. And we'll be coming up with more ideas ourselves as well.
Cool. All right, so onto the program, we'll look at all the questions that you guys posted on Facebook. We'll go through like the most popular one, and then we'll just start going down. If you have some questions in between or that's related to the question, feel free to ask it on this YouTube chat, and we'll try to get to it, and if it's relevant. Cool. Oh, Justin Lin says, more detailed practices like sliding window, finding cycles, or future content. Also, these are like more very niche techniques that you might find. Yeah, it's possible. But it is pretty dangerous if we teach very, very niche ones, because it's very question specific. And the thing about having almost question specific techniques is that you might end up thinking that everything's a nail, and because you have a hammer. I actually fall into the trap sometimes. Like if I hear a question that's very similar to another one, I would automatically think, oh, I have to use this technique. But sometimes it's no. But we'll take that into consideration. Okay, cool. Let's go to the questions.
Yeah, let's get into it. All right, so we do have this poll, right? So every week you can put in your top questions and then vote on that, and we'll just go through them, running down from the top. Vote the question. The top one here is, what kind of impact would a recruiter want to see on a resume?
So I know we talked a lot about impact in your resume, saying like, oh, you need to put like a number, or just say like, what did the project that you did, what kind of impact it had on the company. Yeah, so these things are important, and it makes your resume look a lot better. I'm not sure exactly what the question means 100%, but for me, I think showing that your work mattered in a resume is good enough. In terms of like metric impact, like specific metric impact, or like or a lot of these things, like a recruiter usually, I don't think they're technical enough to understand the complexity of your problem. So just make yourself look useful on a resume.
Yeah, I would say like there's two people who look at your resume, right? You got the recruiter and then the hiring manager and the engineer. So at the first stage, the recruiter is not going to be able to really properly evaluate you on a technical level. So you just want to get through that initial screening and the smoke tests. And then when you actually talk to the actual hiring manager engineers, it's best if the impact that you show is something related to the domain that you're going for, right? Like if you're going for web, full stack engineer or something like that, then it's great to have a bunch of projects that demonstrate that you've been shipping web projects. And if instead you're showing that you're shipping video games, right, that's a whole different type of area. So being able to show that, and then these days I might also mention, like, a lot of people I notice when I look through resumes, I see people are listing a lot of personal projects, and they're starting to look a little bit dime a dozen to me. Like, I've mentioned this before, but it really helps to have a few really good projects that you can talk about. If I see like 5 projects that you've listed and my eyes just glaze over those, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know what any of these are. Any of these sound maybe interesting, but there's just no validation of any of this work. Then none of them count for anything at that point, once you just start listing tons of random stuff like that.
Yeah, I think definitely quality over quantity is important, because a lot of the times when I was in school and I would see other people's resume, and I actually did that too. I did this mistake too, is by listing a bunch of side projects. It was like, oh, this web project, this second web project, this third web project, this hackathon, this competition, blah blah blah. I mentioned so many things. Like now that I go reread my old resumes, I'm like, yo, what the fuck are you trying to say? Like there are so many things that are listed that you're not really being focused. I think what's more impressive is having either 1 or 2 projects that really demonstrates either your domain expertise or that shows that it covers most bases, right? So I always focus on what would give you the most gain, because the more projects you add, there are diminishing marginal returns, even maybe negative returns, because it makes the recruiter you give them eye strain a little bit, right? So yeah, always focus on the quality instead of the quantity. Like sometimes I even consider taking away some of my internships. Even if I did a lot of internships, I even consider taking away some of them, because some of them are no longer relevant, like my old ones, like at Scotiabank. And funny thing, my brother does not list any of his internships. He's a lot older now and he's experienced, but he only lists 2 Sigma on work experience. That's it.
Yeah, I've also removed a bunch of my old internships on my resume as well, and positions that I don't really care about. As I mentioned before, like, your resume is not a fact sheet, right? It's a brochure that is very biased and it tells the story that you want to tell. It's kind of like photography, right? Like, you show your perspective and you just highlight your best shots, right? You don't have to show the whole thing. The other stuff, maybe it will come up in the background check, and that's fine. And if you didn't mention it, you didn't mention it, and that's okay.
So this one person said, can we get examples of good projects and bad ones? So here's the thing. In a resume, it's very hard to determine if your project was done well or if it's bad, or even if a project is good for your resume or bad, because it really depends on which companies you're applying to and what your aim is. So that's why I think it's more about on you. Like for this project, did you work hard and long on it such that you learned a lot of things and you could talk about it for very long? Like if there's a recruiter, or so maybe not recruiter, an interviewer that asks you about this project, can you talk about it in great depths? Because if you can't, they're gonna smell your bullshit. So you have to make sure that, oh, this project was kind of your baby and you kind of know it inside out, the implementation of every single aspect.
Yeah, and I might mention, like, you only need maybe 2 really good projects that you can talk about in depth, right? So a good interview, right? You talk about 1 project, 1 good one. That's all I want to know. If for any reason that 1 good project is not good, like for the domain, or you're not able to explain it in a way that I care about, you have a second backup project that you talk about that somehow catches my interest. And then we move on to the coding exercise, right? And if you just get those portions in, that's a good interview. That's how. So again, you're right. It's that quality over the quantity.
All right. Next question.
How to balance data structures and lead coding skills and side projects once you get a job?
Okay, so once you get your dream job, or just your job? Because I'm guessing once you get your dream job, you're done. You don't need to lead code or do side projects. But I'm guessing,
I would say you do. Like, we see a lot of people who even work at FANG companies who will still jump between FANG companies.
oh, that's
right?
if you want to change jobs.
Yeah, like, that's the best way to get additional to boost your compensation actually is to just switch jobs like that. So then how do you balance your lead coding skills?
Well, for me, it's I've talked about this a lot actually. If you can get the interviews, then you don't need to do side projects if you don't want to anymore, because your resume is strong enough to get the interviews from my perspective. So your bottleneck now is to pass the interview, and most of the time that's data structure and lead code skills. For example, when I switched from Facebook to my new company, I didn't do any side projects because my resume was strong enough to switch. And all I need to do was data structure and lead code. So that was 100% of my time.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say actually, one great way to prepare for interviews actually is if you're already working in a company, you can conduct interviews. Like try to get in that loop and help participate, and then you can see what all the mistakes other people are making and see their resume. And just being on the other side of that fence gives you a lot of insight into how that whole process is, and it may even make you a little bit less, I don't know, bitter or jaded about some of this stuff, just because you'll see like it's difficult to really evaluate people well, and there's not that many great techniques to do it except for like these lead code whiteboarding questions. That's just there's other ways, right? Like you could have like someone work with you for a week, but that just takes way too much time sometimes. And beyond that, we also do have that program, dailyinterviewpro.com, in which you can do a coding question every single day, and we send you the solution for a small fee. And like I audit every single, like we write through these solutions and just make sure that the questions are good, and then the solutions are correct as well, and properly explained. So, yeah.
Cool.
Okay, next one. Should you list unfinished projects on a resume?
So usually it depends what you mean by finished, because like a project, you can always keep working on it if it's a good project, because it's very obvious to me that sometimes when I read a resume, or okay, maybe less so, but when I meet the person and I read their resume, especially when I was in college, it's very obvious that they do the project just to pad their resume. It's very easy to sniff out the difference between those people and the people who actually were passionate about doing a project and they like to keep working on it. So for people who are passionate, if you ask them, they would say, yeah, my project is never finished. I keep iterating over it and I keep building on top of it. It's something that is a lifelong thing because they actually enjoy making it. So that question kind of makes you, that kind of shows you already that you might be making projects just for a resume, which isn't a bad thing. It could be a tactic, right? But it kind of reminds me of this thing. It's kind of like Ivy League application for like universities or like colleges. Back then for applications, people just apply, they do the SATs, nothing too fancy. And then sooner or later, most people realize that, oh, people who have extracurriculars tend to get in more. Oh, what kind of extracurriculars? Oh, most of them are president of the class, or I don't know what they call it, but all these leadership skills. And then a lot of people start doing the same thing because they saw that it worked for other people. That is kind of similar to what's happening right now in the Silicon Valley industry, because now we know that Silicon Valley jobs are really hot, programming is really hot. So a lot of people, they ask other people what works and what doesn't, and then they just kind of like copy it. So in some ways you could do that and it might help you get like an upper hand. But I do think that if you make a project that you really truly care about, it would show in your interviews and it would give you like an upper edge compared to everyone else. So back to the original question, should you list unfinished projects? If you have to and you don't have any finished projects, yes, you could list some unfinished projects if you feel like you can talk about it for in depth, because it's very possible that you don't finish it. There's a lot of like manual work or like a lot of work that you don't like to do that still has to be done, but you understand every single concept that you've used to build that project, then yes, it's okay to put unfinished projects. Sometimes it's even good because it shows that you have the ambition and perseverance to keep working on a project that you care about.
Yeah, I just want to add in here though that about the point, back in the day, it was rare to have personal projects, right? Like there wasn't even GitHub, right? And Amazon SES, like Amazon AWS, right? Like these services weren't that big. So if anyone did come up with a pet project, it was going to be pretty good. Nowadays, everyone's caught on to the idea that people like to see pet projects, and people are just throwing tons of stuff on their resume, and it's just dime a dozen. So one thing I've always prided myself on, actually, and my secret weapon, was that I finished projects. Like, I made sure that anything I made, I finished it, and then I launched it. And I always said to myself, well, yeah, that last 10%, like just finishing that is something that very few engineers do. Engineers love to tinker around with code or something like that, right? Like play around with the puzzle. And as soon as that challenge is done, they don't want to do the marketing. They don't want to finish the project. So if you can push yourself, you take a project that you've mostly done, go through the last few steps and finish that and launch it and get viewers in and be able to validate that work. You have a website, people can visit it, it looks good. You got users, and you can mention that impact. I think it goes a long way. So
yeah, I actually think so too. When you actually launch a product and you have users, that is like way more impressive, because so many times I see a resume and they list the project. There's either no links where there's no proof, you can't actually see the product, or they give you a link like a Heroku app link where it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, and it's like a dead project. There's nothing going on there. And like if I've gone through the effort to check out your Heroku app and it's nothing, like it's just like okay, it's not even worth pursuing a candidate.
And a lot of people say
if it's not good.
A lot of people say the hardest part of like finishing the project is the last 10%, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, so just take pride in knowing that many people do not finish projects, and if you can do it, it would just set you apart. All right, what does total
TC.
compensation mean? TC, how do you calculate that?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Not everyone knows. Like not everyone that like works. Not everyone that. Yeah, it's only people that are on Blind or on Bay Area. So okay, so total compensation is basically all the whole package that you get when you get a job, and it's composed of mainly three things, which is your salary, your equity, and then your bonus, right? And usually you have a salary, let's just say it's 100K, and then you get a bonus, which is usually a percentage of your salary, like for example 10%. So that means you get $100,000 per year plus $10,000 per year, which is your bonus. And that bonus can be different depending on how you perform at your job. If you do really well, they might give you 15% instead of 10%. If you do really poorly, they might even give you 5% instead of 10%. It really depends of which company, but that is the bonus. And then there's also the signing bonus. Usually I do not add that to my total compensation. They usually do add it, but they would divide it by 4 or 2, I'm not sure, just because it's not really fair to say what your first year total compensation is, because sometimes not annual bonuses, your signing bonus can be like 100K. So yeah, some people do not include that. And and then the last part is the equity. That is how much stocks you're given. And if the company is not public, they give you stock options. That means they give you the ability to buy the stock at a certain level. So that's why they're called options. And then if the company is public, then they just give you straight out the stocks, depending on what the offer was. Like they could offer you 100,000 stocks over 4 years. That means every year you get $25,000 worth of stock, and then they'll just give you that many stock at the strike price that you started on.
Yeah, so I think this is actually interesting in that, like, if you take a look at total compensation, I would say the stock equity portion probably accounts for half sometimes or more, right, of your compensation, which is why public companies pay more than startups, because startups usually they don't have that equity portion, and then they also don't give you the sign-on bonus, or not very high one, which like FANG companies will do for you. So I had spent a long time working at startups, and it wasn't until I got into FANG that I realized, oh wait, right, I now understand, like, that whole stock portion, it's not just paper money like you may imagine it to be in a startup. It's actual real value when the company is public. So
apparently some people when they're high level, I think their stock compensation is higher than their salary,
Yeah.
especially if they joined early and the stock appreciated. And by appreciated, I mean the price increased by a lot.
Yeah.
So sometimes the stocks might be worth more than your salary. So
one interesting thing that some people don't notice though is like you may first take a look at that and you think, oh, you take a look at your total compensation and it doesn't sound so much, but over time you actually get
refreshers.
Yeah, stock refreshers, right? So maybe after you work a year, they give you another 25% or so of your stock.
Oh, that's a lot.
Right? Like, because over 4 years, your stock will fade out. Your equity fades out over about 4 years. So at the end of 4 years, you get zero, which is why they say, okay, well, every year they're going to give you another fourth. And then you find out that actually your income is higher actually because of those refreshers.
Yeah. I guess we could talk a little bit about money since it's a little bit sidetracked, but I think it's important. Like once you get into FANG, there's a few things that you should do. For example, put your money in your 401k because a lot of the times there's company matching, which means once you put the money there, the company might match like maybe 50%, 100%. Usually it's 50%. So it's basically free money if you put your money in 401k. 401k is like a retirement plan thing. And then also for the equity, in my opinion, I usually like auto sell. Like right when I receive the equity, I would sell them right away because, for example, if you work at Facebook, and for a lot of people, they actually don't sell it, but I think it's out of laziness. But in a rational mind, if I gave you, for example, $10,000 right now, what would you do with it? Like, would you buy all Facebook stocks? If your answer is no, then it means you should sell your Facebook stocks technically because you want to put it into something that is more diversified because or else all your eggs are in Facebook. So if Facebook, dies, then you're going to lose all your money and stuff like that. So
And
usually
you would know because you worked at Citadel, right?
Yes, finance guy. But honestly, yeah, Patrick is really good in like about his finances too. So I mean, he could probably tell you a lot
Yeah,
about
do you do
it.
the mega backdoor Roth IRA?
Yeah, I actually don't.
You don't? Okay.
I actually don't. The reason is like one, it requires a lot of work, and two, I'm banking on the fact that I'm gonna be so rich that all this little tax saving is whatever.
Yeah, so I do the mega backdoor Roth IRA. Some tech companies offer that. You can look it up if you want to, but it's a way to add like 26,000 or so to your Roth IRA.
Yeah, like this guy said, S&P index fund, done. That's pretty much what I do.
Yeah, I lost 350,000 on my day trading. So maybe the S&P will do it for you, but
Yeah.
I go into options and futures and
Yeah, he likes to gamble.
crypto. Don't get me started on crypto. That's another one. Right. Are you expected to dress professionally at the tech interview? So how do you dress actually?
I dress like kind of like a long sleeve t-shirt and jeans. Yeah. Long sleeves, jeans, something that's clean.
Yeah.
Because you also don't want to look like you don't care about the interview, right? Just show a little bit of respect to the interviewer.
Yeah, so actually this is a good point in that you want to go there and appear like a colleague. You don't want like a subordinate, superior person type of interaction in which somebody is speaking down at you and you're like a slave to them. You want people to look at you and imagine that they can work with you, that to be able to envision you as just another person at the office, as a colleague, and yet your dress maybe shows a little bit more respect in that scenario. So I usually use like just a button shirt and jeans. Like that's what I would go with. Yeah. Something casual. Some people show up in suits occasionally, which
I'm sure it doesn't hurt them.
It never turns out quite good.
Oh, really? It's even worse. Like,
yeah, it usually like it just.
You know why? It's because of unconscious bias from the interviewer. It's true. You're kind of.
I think it just makes them more tense. Actually, like they're trying to uphold this image of being a know-it-all. And it's important to recognize that you're not supposed to be a know-it-all at an interview. You're supposed to be collaborative admit when you don't know things, have some humility,
Got it.
accept feedback when the
Yeah.
interviewer corrects you.
I see.
And if you go in there and just pretend like, yeah, you know everything, that it messes you up mentally that way sometimes.
That's true. Random question. Tech lead, were you with Joma on your recent vacation? Next question.
Next question. Yeah, we'll have to move on.
Approaching 30 years old. He's 27. He or she's 27. Considering going back to college for a bachelor's in CS. Never graduated college. Any tips? Oh, any tips for college? Well, I think honestly, like you might actually do a lot better. Oh, depends if you're married or have kids and stuff like that. I'm assuming you don't. If you don't have kids and you don't have any other like responsibilities, you might actually do really well because you're a lot more mature than the other college students. And then if you do well and you know what you're doing, then I think you could do really well on that. But in terms of like tips for your career, like do you have any tips on that? Like maybe college might not be always the best idea because it is long, like 4 years.
Yeah, I feel like at that, like I personally would have. I'm not sure if I would go back for that. There are some other options that you could consider, right? Like there are coding boot camps, right? Um, I heard on LinkedIn someone had gone to Align by Northeastern, which is it's this master's program in Silicon Valley, which will get you somebody who actually has no CS background into a complete master's in like 2 years or something like that. So just some programs like that here and there that can get you like the full CS education if that's what you're looking for, and if that's what you're committed to. But I think that sort of background, like I would say a traditional CS background prepares you to do almost anything in tech, including like writing compilers, writing graphics engines, writing an operating system, or writing your own database. Most people aren't out there writing compilers or databases. If you go through a CS education, you can. Like you'll be prepared to do that. You can write like a Google search engine if you wanted to, because you have that sufficient base of knowledge to do it. But
you're not really, especially if you work for fan companies, that's not what you're going to do.
Yeah, most fan companies, they're not looking for that. They're looking for people to just glue some pieces of some components together here and there, which is why you could consider like a coding bootcamp if you feel that you want that full set of information, and build a base off of that, right? Yeah.
Let me answer some of the questions on the chat. Is rotational software engineer job at Facebook portal has potential to convert it into full-time? From what I understand of your question, yeah, rotational software engineer programs, for them, most of the time you work for a year, and then after a year, they see if you're good enough to become a full-time. So yeah, you do become a full-time after. And then after taxes and personal expenses, how much money can you save working at a tech company? I mean, it depends how much you make, right? But yeah, most people save a lot of money when they work at a tech company.
Well, I would say like for Silicon Valley, housing costs so much. It's like at least probably 2,500.
What's 2,500
per month for rent?
Per month. That's not true. I pay less than that.
If you have roommates, or I guess. But like for example, my place like is like 4,000, right? And then that's like 48K post-tax money. So we're talking about like 70K pre-tax. So like if I'm working a job that's paying 70K, that's all gone to
rent.
Like it's all gone to rent. So like given a 100K job, it's like 30K to take home after tax. It's like 15K. So housing just eats up a lot here. Unless you live with your parents, you get roommates, you live in a van.
Yeah, I mean, I think most entry-level new grads, they live with roommates. You kind of have to.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen anyone who's a new grad who pays more than 2,000 for their apartment, because it's just not feasible to save money if you pay so much for an apartment. Yeah.
Like, do you know people who live alone? Like,
Oh, I do, but like they're usually like higher level. They're not new grads.
yeah, I would be, yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to live alone. Okay. Oh wait, I guess this person has been asking this question a lot. Let's see. Could you recommend some stepping stone jobs for me for SWE? I am 30 years old, have BBA in finance, 4 years experience in loan consulting, and the data blog. Stepping stone jobs for you. Well, I mean, it's kind of exactly what we've been talking about in our courses and our questions, right? So, I mean, what you want to do is you want to either go to like boot camp or something like that, and then just apply to any job because your first stepping stone is a software engineering job.
Well, I mean, people are mentioning here data science is one way to get in, and I would agree with that. Like
data science analytics.
Yeah, kind of similar to what you're doing, right? Like, or what you were doing, because like if you have experience with your like running a data blog, communicating, right, presentation skills,
you might be
like
right, yeah.
then yeah, data science could be one way to get in. Your your pure software engineering skills, if that's a little bit weaker. There are so many. I think one mistake I personally made was thinking that I had to do software engineering, and I would always only apply to that. But there are so many other jobs out there, and when you just take a look, you can see like when I finally got into Google, I saw like, oh, tons of people are here, and they're all doing something different, and it's not all like there are a lot of software engineers, but there's also a whole bunch. The teams are usually composed of so many different types of people that I did not even realize existed.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, Justin wrote. Like, you could go to JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, since that person's already in finance. So maybe you could talk to some of the people that you work with already, try to move into a more analytics role, to a more technical role, and then slowly but surely, yeah, just use whatever you have at your advantage, because most of the time, like advices aren't like a full, how do you say, like a catch-all kind of net. It really depends on what your competitive advantage is. If your competitive advantage is that you have a business degree, finance degree, and you already work for these like for these finance companies, then yeah, try to leverage that, utilize that. Okay.
Okay, all right. Let's see. I have professional experience with impactful projects for private companies in my resume, but my GitHub is empty. How bad does that look?
It's totally fine.
Yeah, I did not do GitHub. I don't do open source.
I don't do open source. I don't show them my code. Yeah, never. Even as an internship, even now.
Yeah, even when I review resumes, like I don't go to people's GitHubs, by the way. Like I think that's something recruiters just started asking for, but I think a lot of people don't do open source. Like even in my even my colleagues, I don't think they do it necessarily. Some do. All right. If you were still a college student, what would you do differently?
I would partake in more extracurricular activities because I want to make more diverse friends. Yeah, but I know you guys are asking more in terms of like CS career and stuff like that. For me, I think I should have stuck with software engineering jobs for my internships. I did a lot of like data science and like PM and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think it's kind of an overkill because in the end, I think I do like software more than the other kind of jobs. So if I stuck to like software engineer, I think I could have got out of bachelor and get a head start in terms of like software in my career. And I think that's kind of like a little thing that I would change. But other than that, in terms of career wise, I think I'm pretty happy with what I did.
Let me ask you, did you join honor societies or like CS networks or anything like that?
I did not. I mean, maybe because in Canada it's different, right? We don't really have honor societies, I think,
okay.
or unless I just never got invited to them or no one talked to me about it. But yeah, I mean, if I went to not Waterloo, I think how I would have done differently is I would have gone to Waterloo because Waterloo made my life way easier. I was able to get co-op internships very easily, and almost everyone, like I think maybe at least 60-70% of the people who are in co-op ends up at a FANG company after they graduate. So
Yeah, I
think
would
about that.
probably have applied to Waterloo. That's what I
Yeah.
I think Waterloo is like an easy
Mhm.
easy mode.
Very easy.
I know for me, I spent a lot of time working on my own individual projects, and even on like the day before a final exam, I would still be so interested in my own project that I would be doing that. And I think my grades probably suffered because of that. And I remember at a point thinking, I wish I just had like perfect grades, because I felt that I couldn't get research positions because my grades were not like they were pretty good, right? It's like 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, but GPA, but still like there were other people who like with a really good GPA, you could get those research positions which will set you up on that project work. You don't need to do project work if you have research positions. You can get into like top tier grad schools if that's what you're going for. You can get to know professors. So there are some good things about that.
Yeah.
But it's just very difficult to balance that with your own project work as well, which is still needed.
Yeah. I think if you can't predict the future, like you don't know what exactly you want to do, it's always good to open as many doors as possible. And having good grades do open doors, especially in research, right? And because for me, I think it's like I take for granted what I already have. So I did get pretty good grades, and but I never wanted to go to do research or do a master's. But so that's why for me, I might say, oh, maybe I shouldn't have worked so hard on grades and more just like have some fun in life. But yeah, you're right. Like if ever I wanted to go to grad school, like I might be able to because of like the grades that I got. So yeah,
Yeah, although I think at some point also like
it doesn't matter anymore.
no, I think like grades, like no matter how much you study, if you're
Oh
gonna
yeah.
like if the test is just hard, it's just hard.
Yeah.
And maybe like your time is better spent just working on some other project.
Like everything has diminishing marginal return, so you have to really calculate it for yourself, weigh the pros and cons.
All right. I don't have experience working in an English speaking country. I'm not in the US. How hard would it be for me to get into FING?
I don't know, like, because I have a lot of coworkers that have never. Well, that's how their stepping stone is, and they're usually from China. They go to a school that's pretty good in China, Tsinghua or something like that, and then what they do is they do a master's at like Carnegie Mellon in CS or Stanford or one of those like schools that people like to hire from, and then in that and then they're able to get into FANG through that stepping stone, and they do an internship during their masters.
Yeah, you see a lot of people who do masters here, and like from a country abroad, and then from there they get into FANG, just because they're able to be here locally and just interview with plenty of different companies while they're here. There's also some people who didn't necessarily take that route, right? Like it's just all international, like abroad education, and then they come in here. Which is probably the traditional route. And then there's, of course, I mean, FANG is also generally a global company, so you can also apply to your local divisions there too.
Yeah, like if you're at Tokyo, you can apply to your Tokyo office. Are there offices in India?
Yeah, there are.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt to work for FANG in your own country, and maybe you can transition later. I'm not sure, but yeah, even working for FANG at other countries is really good, and it's usually a lot better because the delta between a FANG company at those countries and not FANG is so high, right?
Yeah. And some of these sometimes the location is actually easier in other places instead of in like Silicon Valley. Okay, what let's see. What is it like to be a YouTuber at a FANG company? Any publicity due to subscribers?
I prefer not to answer that question, but I also don't 100% get what your question means. But if you mean like, do I get noticed? Yeah, I get noticed.
Yeah, I think Silicon Valley
That's
it's a small place. So
Yeah.
like here I get noticed much more. Like when I was on vacation in Hawaii, like nobody noticed me except for one person.
Really?
Here, like yeah, it's just
Mhm.
more. Let's see. Should you list two or more universities if you happen to transfer a lot during your college year?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I have a feeling I have a feeling you should just list the best one, or your. I'm guessing the better one is the later one. You know, if that's the case, yes, you should list it. But you should always have the university that you last went to. You know, just so that you're honest. And then if the previous one is better, then yeah, I guess list that too. But they might ask like why you switched from the better university to a shittier one. But um, but yeah, I don't know. Just at least list your most recent one, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's
But it doesn't matter.
yeah, I don't think it matters that
Yeah.
much. You can I like I studied abroad. I just listed both, and yeah, it's fine. Let's see. There's a question here. For experienced candidates, do FANG companies place equal importance on algorithms and data structures for entry level jobs, or is it more focused on systems design?
Wait, for entry level jobs? If it's for entry level
Oh,
jobs,
as an entry level job. So
for
I mean, overall for experienced candidates, usually they will throw in the systems
oh,
design interview, right? For entry level, not necessarily, right? They may just skip that altogether. There's going to be far more focus on that systems design. There may even be two systems design interviews for experienced candidates, maybe more on like the whole behavioral teamwork portion as well, communication, leadership skills, and then like being able to do the coding, data structures, and algorithms. That's kind of assumed that you probably have that down by now. Um, so yeah, I would say, but even still, I would say like even for experienced candidates, they still smoke you through those lead code questions. Same stuff. So that's why it's a good skill to always have that ability. And plenty of people who think they're experienced, right? Like people who even work in FANG companies, they go through these and they're rusty on lead on like data structures, algorithms. They forget that stuff and then they don't pass it. So you can't underestimate that.
as a front end dev, should I be diving deep into LeetCode? You guys get asked the same questions, right? Even if it's
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand, like at least the way I would do interviews, I only have two questions I ask, right? I prepare two good ones. It's not easy to come up with very good questions that can go into depth and like they're well calibrated. And I know exactly how far a candidate should be able to go and like what I expect. So I only have two questions and just ask those two questions to everybody. And I think a lot of people do that. Um, Not everybody though. So that's why like it doesn't matter what role you're interviewing for. Like if I'm interviewing you, I'm just gonna ask those same two questions. Which is why, yeah, even for front end devs, you should know your lead code. Um, Although I've done a few front end developer interviews as well. For them, I usually also highly prioritize up to date knowledge on like frameworks, right? So like many people come in and um, they don't know the latest like frameworks and syntax, right? And when I compare that to another candidate who comes in and they're up to date on all that ES6 syntax and the shorthands and like the code is looking clean and elegant and see on their resume they've got React and Angular, that's just starting to look solid. And then I can say, well, yeah, this person looks like someone I could recommend for a front end role. Um, yep.
All right, next question. I think it's about corgis. How many how many corgi plushies do you own, Joma? And on a more serious note, can you break down all elements of a typical TC in more details? So in terms of plushies, I have 200 of them. Like the small ones. I have 200 corgis, but I've been giving away some of them for people who donated to the fundraiser. And then I have a few big corgis, and I also have a few like plushies that's not related to corgis, but yeah. And then the serious note, break down all elements of a typical TC. Do you want to know like actual numbers, or do you mean just like the other person, like what is in a TC? Okay, I guess I could give you a typical TC. I think what you would see in a new grad position would be like maybe 110, 120K salary. That would usually be your initial, and then maybe 30K, 30K sign-in bonus. And then for equity, maybe like 200K, or maybe less than that, maybe like 170K, 150K for 4 years, right? So then your total compensation at the end would probably be like 150K a year nowadays. Yeah. But Chris Jariza, he actually got a new grad offer for Lyft for like 200K total compensation. So
Yeah,
that's possible too.
I thought new grad offers would probably be TC like 200K or 200 to 250 maybe.
Uh-huh.
That's
Yeah.
kind of what I thought. But it really depends.
Yeah,
Like that's for
top shit.
Yeah, that's for FANG companies. I mean, it's still not unheard of. Like if you work at a startup, it probably start at like 100K. And I think that's good too, right? And then it go up to like 150K. So again, like I wouldn't worry too much about your compensation, right? When you're starting out, it's all good, it's all fine. Like none of this stuff really is going to matter all that much in the long term. You should worry about optimizing compensation, say 5 years down the road, when your skills are good, right? When you've built up experience, and then your next step has much more impact on what you're doing there. That's when you want to really be careful about which companies you're going to.
Okay, Kristen Douglas, I'm not sure what this question means. If you're interviewing at FANG for a level 2, would you ever been considered for entry level? What does level 2 mean? Do you mean L2 or do you mean like L4 because it's the second level? Because L2 does exist. They're usually contractors or like non-technical roles. So I'm not really sure. We'll come back to this question if like you could write like in detail what your question actually is, but we're gonna move on to the next question, unless you know.
Yeah, well, I think I can kind of mention, like I know usually when you interview, people have an idea about what level you may come in as, and sometimes it's a little bit hazy. And so that's part of the whole interview process. If your performance in that interview is extremely good, and you're showing like, hey, you got data structures and algorithms down, and it's all looking good, then they may bump you. They may just say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we were considering you for level 2, maybe level 3 to work out here. But again, it depends. Like if you go in and based on your background, if they've already said, you know what, it doesn't look like you have the projects or the education to slot you in at level 3, then
So usually what I see more often is that they bump you down. Like at your company, you could be an L4, but then once you get into FANG, they'll put you to L3, either because of your interview performance, because sometimes if you're not that great, you didn't perform as well, they might bump you down, or they always want to put you down because they don't think that your experience at that company matches FANG. Sometimes that happens, I'm sorry. But I have a friend and he worked at LinkedIn. Like this is actually a great company, it's LinkedIn. He worked at LinkedIn for 4 years. He got to L4, but then once he got to Google, he became an L3. So that's a big down level. So that might happen.
Yeah, which again, like I guess for me, I don't see the big issue, right? It's like it's all good, like if you're working in like tech in Silicon Valley, like that's good. And if your performance is good, you'll get up level.
Yeah, exactly.
And if not, then you get to just cruise a little bit longer.
Yeah. I mean, if the money's good, the money's good.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Let's see. When you apply for a senior role but only perform one level below during the interview, will Fang try to find another role or level for you?
That's actually related to the thing that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will. A lot of people, if they apply for an L5 position and they don't think you're an L5 because during the interview your system design was weak, they might say like, oh, we can give you an L4 position. So
yeah, I think there's one interesting thing I heard about one time in a conversation somewhere where like someone was saying, it's kind of has to do with ageism as well, or the concept of that, which is like people think that essentially like as if you're interviewing for a more senior role, it's important to just be able to show that like you have that upwards trajectory, right? So that you're not stagnating and you're still like, learning and improving yourself and working on, impactful projects and just doing the best that you can out there. And that's showing that you're not stagnating, that you're continuing to learn and build upon yourself. And so that's going to look good, right? And same, I think the same kind of goes for here, right? When you apply for a senior role, like if you're showing that you still have that passion to learn and you're enthusiastic about it, then that's good. Sometimes people come in and they act senior, they act like management, they act like they're too good for the code, and in that scenario, like I don't even give them good marks. I'll just say like, yeah, this is a no hire. This person doesn't seem like they're interested in coding, or it seems like they're stagnating. They haven't touched the code in a long time. They don't have the personality for it or something like that. So it's not simply that you'll just be down leveled if you're not good enough.
Yeah, you might actually
you could just be struck out if you don't even show that capability to work at a lower level. If you show that you do have that capability to do that, then yeah, you could be considered for that, I would say. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Do we have any other questions here?
Yeah. So I think we should just do like live questions from what we talked about from all of this. Like, do you have any questions for clarification? Because sometimes questions might come up while we answer some questions. So I think now's like the perfect time to just go full blast on your questions, and then we'll try to answer all of them. For example, like Facebook versus Google.
I can kind of talk about this one because I know what.
Because Justin Lin has all the offers, so he's trying to decide which one to go to because he's balling with offers right now.
Really?
Justin Lin, he's like, because I'm trying to decide which one to go,
Honestly, I think like they're both very different companies, and for me at least, when I switched companies, I wanted that diversity of corporate culture, just to be able to understand what it's like to work at different companies. And the more places that you work at, the more you understand like what works and what doesn't work in different companies, and what may work for one company is not going to work at another company. Netflix, right? It's also very fascinating in terms of culture because it's a firing culture, but they really like Netflix's culture, for example, is the complete opposite of Google's. Okay, so Google's is process oriented. They don't like to depend on people. They like to depend on the system. If there's a mistake, no one gets fired. The process is to blame, right? And so they come up with a bunch of documentation, scripts, automations, processes, and then you follow the rules, and then that's how you handle issues and crises. And it's very engineering driven. Everybody is technical. The PMs at Google are some of the most impressive that I've personally seen, because a lot of them, like, they have that technical knowledge. Facebook is far more product driven from what I've seen. Like, they don't care so much about the engineering, and they don't give so much time to crafting really well documented processes and engineering. They just want to ship stuff out. Right? They just want to push as much code out through the door. And I remember at Google, we would look at Facebook and say, how do they ship so fast? Like they're just shipping so much stuff. Like, uh, why are we so slow? And we were always thinking, how can we go faster? Netflix, by the way, is like they fire the person if there's a problem, and they replace the person, and they don't like process. So it's like they just want to get rid of all that red tape. Yeah.
So which one's better?
Which one's? I would recommend Google if you're starting out and you want to learn like really good engineering practices. I think that it's a top-notch place to do that, and it's also more chill than Facebook. Facebook is like it's chaos, but it's all good. It's any of these are like you're kind of like picking at straws here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, depends on your personality type. What's a good design to code ratio for a senior level? I think, what does that mean? Do you mean the interview? I might just skip that question.
A design to code ratio for a senior level?
Like, you mean during an interview or your job?
Oh, design docs and stuff, maybe? Writing design docs?
Maybe.
I mean,
I guess you can answer that, yeah.
I think it really depends on the company you're at, right? I know like some companies, they want senior engineers to continue to code a ton. Some company, I think for me, when I was at Google, it was like they wanted me to stop coding and focus more on like doing all that other stuff like mentorship, writing design documents, coming up with new initiatives, stuff like stuff like that. So and overall, I would say actually like if all you do is write design docs that people pick up on and you drive that initiative, that's like what a really good senior engineer would probably do.
Damn, I want to be a senior engineer. Do you guys think talking at conferences is helpful to get interviews? Is it worth the effort? I have no idea. I would guess no, because like you could put on your resume and that's one extra bullet point, but I'm not sure how much that matters. Unless you're famous and you, like, for example, if you invented React or something, I don't know. What do you think?
Does this mean networking at conferences or actually being a speaker?
No, I think being the speaker.
I mean,
but if you're a speaker, you're probably already legit, right?
So like, you know the story of the guy who wrote Homebrew.
Oh yeah, like he didn't even get into Google.
Yeah, because like a lot of these people, they're like they create this nice system, but they didn't study up on the LeetCode stuff. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of interviewers, they don't care about all the other cool stuff you've done. If like because there's just so much BS out there, right? Everyone comes in with a story, and everyone comes in saying that they're impressive. So it's hard to kind of dig through all that, and it's kind of a requirement, right? At the end of the day, to be able to say, well, you got through the whiteboarding data structures and algorithms and you performed well there, and then we take a look, okay, well, you also got all this other cool stuff you spoke at some conference, and if that's all looking good, then that could be a good candidate.
Yeah. And then there's one question about, hey Joma, tech lead. It's by Michael. Thanks for taking the time to do this. I am a college junior studying for internship interviews. However, I feel I'm not improving. Any tips for a beginner at LeetCode? I mean, some of the chat people already told you, but yeah, start with the easy questions. Don't be so hard on yourself. It's really hard in the beginning. I mean, I struggled a lot with it too. And do you like puzzles? I mean, if you like puzzles and you like brain teasers and stuff like that, just treat it as such. Don't think of it as, oh my God, I can't do this easy question, I won't be able to get a job. Think of it as like curiosity, like, oh, how do I do this? How do I do it? Oh, cool, I'm learning something new. So every question that you do, you slowly but surely you get better. It's kind of like saying you start a video game and you're like, oh my God, this boss is too hard. Like it sucks. But we don't get as frustrated in games because we know that it doesn't really matter if you can't finish the game. And then that's why you're able to keep practicing, keep playing, and then you just get better and better. Just like everything else, it's like a muscle that you work on, right? So how come in the video games people are able to get very good? They're able to practice a lot and get really good. It's because they don't put too much pressure on them, thinking that if you can't pass it, then X won't happen. So try to leave out the X, which is getting the jobs, and try to focus on improving yourself as a person who's good at LeetCode for fun, for learning. And then as you practice more, you realize, wow, these medium questions are actually not that hard anymore. And more you'll feel confident, and that kind of that compounds itself, and you'll do a lot better.
I also have I have two tips actually. So one is one is, at least for me, I used to do a lot of my interviews in like traditional C, C++, Java, and it didn't click for me until I started writing PHP later on. And that's why we also recommend using Python, because these languages are just so quick and elegant to write in that like it's just much quicker to create concepts. Like if you want a hash map of hash maps, like you can do that in one line or something in like Python or PHP. And these languages naturally support structures like this. It's just harder to do these things in C++ or Java. You may need to like import libraries that you didn't know about necessarily. And then the other thing is LeetCode, I don't think it's not necessarily the be all and end all. Okay, so funny for me, when I got my first job at Sony Pictures in LA, they didn't ask me LeetCode at all. It was just a conversation about projects, right? What type of work I did, what type of person I was. So, and there's a number of companies, like a few companies here and there, like especially startups, you can take a look at. They're not going to focus so much on drilling you on LeetCode, right? The top FANG companies, they're going to drill you on that stuff because it's so processized. But if you're not super confident and solid on this stuff, some of these startups may be ways that you can get going, especially if you go to places like, say, like Southern California, Los Angeles. That's not so ingrained in that whole like LeetCode culture that Silicon Valley may have. And so you could consider some places like that to get your start. And then as you start building up knowledge, information, and experience, then you become much better. And you may find, like, at least for me, I realized, there's just not that many algorithms and data structures and time-space complexities that you need to know. When you go through a textbook, it's like, oh, there's n factorial time-space complexity, or n to the n. And when you take a look, it's like, there's not that many algorithms that are operating in n factorial time, or n to the n. There's actually just usually like linear, logarithmic, right, and log n. There's not all that many that come in very commonly.
All right, well, we're out of time. So yeah, thank you so much for joining today. I guess just one more thing with the LeetCode stuff. Yeah, check out Daily Interview Pro. I mean, this is it's very, very good, because one LeetCode a day keeps the unemployment away, and that's basically the motto for Daily Interview Pro. So,
yeah, I stay one day ahead of you guys, turning out those questions and answers for you guys.
Yeah, technically, yeah, he does them like one day ahead. So the questions that you see, he has done them. But I help too a little bit.
Yeah,
just a little bit. But okay, and then there's also, also always remember, it's not always about like FANG company. Some other companies are good too. For example, my brother wanted me to tell you guys this, but his company got acquired by Appfolio, which is kind of like a big company. It's a public company. They're hiring. So if ever you want to apply, maybe you could just apply for interview practice, but I'll write their company name. It's called Appfolio. My brother's company got bought by them, and then he's going to make a video with me soon, and he's going to try to plug recruiting for his company. But I might as well tell you guys now. But yeah, cool. All right.
Cool. Nice.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thanks.
See ya.
See you next time.